Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons where we're trying to take a darker tone with everything we do here. So if you like edgier kind of content, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. A big thank you to all the Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Everything you do for us is absolutely incredible. We couldn't be more thankful for you guys. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, the link is in the description. And we are doing a huge push to hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We are on track to make that. We might even make that earlier, and we couldn't do it without your support. If you've been here before, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button. If you make it all the way through the video, definitely consider that. We really need the support in order to hit that goal. With all that out of the way, we're going to talk about the final class in Ua6, what they did to the rogue. So the base rogue really only went through one or two more changes, which is really unique. The rogue is such an interesting class because you really have two rules of thought with the rogue. Either A, it does great, it's amazing, it's awesome, or B, if you miss once, it's terrible. And it kind of just flows between those two schools of thought. So it makes it very difficult to kind of see exactly where it gets placed. It's never really fully considered with big Nova builds. It's not really fully considered for a lot of multi-classing. Realistically, a lot of the times it's kind of left to its own ideal, which is an interesting concept considering what the rogue is from the theory and the lore behind it. Alright, so the big change is at 5th level with Cunning Strike. It states that you have developed cunning ways to use your sneak attack. When you deal your sneak attack damage, you can add one of the following Cunning Strike effects. Each effect has a die cost, which is the number of sneak attack damage you must forego to add the effect. You remove the die before the rolling, and the effect occurs immediately after the attack's damage is dealt. For example, if you add the poison effect, remove 1d6 sneak attack damage from your roll. If your Cunning Strike requires a saving throw, the DC equals 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your dexterity modifier. So basically like dex spellcasting. The first one they have listed is Disarm, and that cost is 1d6. The target must succeed on a dexterity saving throw, or it drops one item of your choice that it's holding. Poison, another 1d6 cost. You add a toxin to your strike, forcing the target to make a constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the target has the poison condition for 1 minute. At the end of each of its turn, the poisoned target can repeat the save, ending the effect on itself on a success. To use this effect, you must have a poisoner's kit on your person. Trip. If the target is large or smaller, it must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or have the prone condition. Withdrawal. Immediately after your attack, you move up to half your speed without provoking opportunity attacks. So what this does is give you an option to really change what you're doing with sneak attack, which gives you a little bit of utility. Disarm can be great if you're fighting a high level spellcaster. You can cause them to drop their arcane focus. Maybe they have a staff or you know, like a wizard book or something like that, or anybody wielding a magical weapon or something. That can make a huge difference in your game, and it can realistically be very, very worth it, especially for the cost of a 1d6. Granted, sneak attack damage is how you keep pace with other character classes, so it is a very, very important tool in your kit. Poison, I love. I love the fact that you can add just a poisonable effect to a rogue attack. I hope Constitution saving throws aren't as overwhelmingly to combat in 1D&D when they make the new monster manual, which I hope they will do. Maybe they'll make their con bonuses smaller and just give them bigger hit points or hit dice in order to roll that damage out, to roll their health out. But if you could poison a creature, even for a couple of turns, that disadvantage is so useful on anything that they're doing, any kind of attacking animal, monster, anything that does mainly physical attacks or attack rolls. Getting poisoned is a huge debilitating effect on them. It's really, really worth it, especially if you don't have other characters that can add that to your party, to your party's arsenal. Trip is great depending on who you have going after you. If you go first and then it's the rest of your party and you have really heavy melee, yeah, Trip is a big advantage, especially if you don't have like a battle master or someone that can produce that effect on their own. Withdrawal, you do have cunning action that you can disengage or hide or dash with, so I really don't see that getting a lot of action or play. So again, everything else about the rogue is basically staying to the same up until level 11, where you get improved cunning strike. Now you can use up to 2 cunning strike effects when you deal sneak attack damage, paying the die cost for each effect. So for the die cost of 2d6, you can really make a decision and really give yourself a circumstance where you can cause these great effects like trip and poison, and really give yourself this opportunity to really give utility on a new higher level. It's great, it can be useful, but again, that sacrifice of your sneak attack damage is a very healthy cost. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot to consider, especially considering how often you deal your sneak attack and where exactly you're planning on using it, or what the circumstance of the combat is. Again, everything else is going to stay pretty much the same. When you reach 14th level, you get devious strikes. You have practiced new ways to use your sneak attack deviously. The following effects are now among your cunning strike options, which is great. You get 3 new ones. You get daze. The target must succeed on a constitution saving throw, or it has a daze condition until the end of its next turn. Knockout. And this is 66. Daze was 2d6. 66. The target must succeed on a constitution saving throw, or it has the unconscious condition for 1 minute or until it takes any damage. The unconscious target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. Or obscure. This is a 3d6 cost. You strike near the target's eyes. The target must succeed on a dexterity saving throw, or has the blinded condition until the end of the next turn. Now, knockout is a huge cost. At 14th level, to incapacitate someone and make them unconscious for a minute, maybe, it seems like way too much of a cost for me personally. Obscure, I think it's actually pretty good, because not only are you posing disadvantage on whoever you hit, because they rely on sight to hit things, but your party gets advantage on attacks against him. So again, the circumstance of who you're fighting and what you're fighting and whether or not you can put these circumstances on the enemy might depict when you can use these. This is not an every round kind of a thing, or at least it doesn't really feel that way, but you can use this pretty regularly. So if you're fighting and say your paladin just can't land a hit and you desperately need those smites to take down this big monster that's just wrecking your party, I'd take the cost of 3d6 and try and obscure the target. It would be totally worth it. Give that paladin the opportunity to get advantage, maybe save yourself from getting hit a few times, and do that for your party. It does give you this opportunity to be more of utility, more of a support, and giving you options in combat that you've never really had. And I think that's really the best part about the new cunning strikes. I think it's an incredible opportunity to do more, because a lot of the times, if you're not an arcane trickster, what are you doing as a rogue? You're most of the time you're just doing straight damage every round and running and hiding. This gives you an opportunity to take a step back from that damage race, and you have an opportunity to support your party. You have an opportunity to debilitate the enemy. And I love conditions. I love the idea of debilitating, putting disadvantage, and crippling them with status effects. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful creative use of these abilities. But you have to weigh the weight of that cost yourself. I happen to like a lot of them. I don't see the real damage of dropping a few of them, because it's really, sometimes you can roll just ones on those anyway, and your damage won't be that high. Sometimes it's more important, and you get to weigh that choice, and that makes every round a little bit more interesting for the rogue. So I'm really behind that feature. The Arcane Trickster really didn't change that much. The only difference is when you use the 13th level ability, Versatile Trickster. You gave the ability to distract targets with your mage hand. When you use the disarm or trip options of your Cunning Strike, you can also target that option at a creature within 5 feet of the spectral hand. Now, I don't know if that necessarily transfers damage. It doesn't says it does. I don't think it does, but I think you should really just iron that out with your DMs. But being able to disarm 2 people at the same time can be very, very well worth that cost. And, at 13th level, depending on who you're fighting, what you're fighting, or where you're fighting them, that can be a very, very big advantage to you. Outside of that, everything else is basically the same for the Arcane Trickster. Just a note about the Spell Thief ability at 17th level. I think it gets a lot of flack because A, it's a super high level to get it, and you really don't get much use out of it, but it's more of a defensive ability. When you steal the spell, the creature you stole the spell from can't cast it for 8 hours. So at 17th level, you have a maximum of 3rd level spell slots. If you're fighting an enemy and they're a caster and they're throwing out Fireball, if you catch this on the first shot, not only do you negate the spell's effect, but that creature cannot cast that spell again. And so that avoids a whole bunch of trouble you would have to go through positioning and things like that. Again, it's 17th level. Are you really going to see a lot of fireballs going at you? Probably not. I think this ability is just way undertuned for the level you get it. It should be gotten way earlier, personally, but that's just a little bit of a rant on Spell Thief. The Assassin. This definitely got a couple of changes that I'm actually a little bit excited about. So first and foremost, you still get bonus proficiency in disguise kit and poisoner's kit. I love poison, even though it's not really an optimal thing, but it's still a personal favorite of my own. But your level 3 assassin has changed a little bit. You now have advantage on initiative rolls, which is huge. That is a very, very big boon to you. And your surprising strikes has changed a little bit. During the first round of each combat, you have advantage on attack rolls against any creature that hasn't taken a turn. If your sneak attack hits any target during that round, the target takes extra damage of the weapon's type equal to your rogue level. That's just awesome. That's just a flat damage boost every time you start a combat. You're definitely going to go before someone. You have a high dexterity, and you have advantage on initiative rolls. You should definitely be able to land that every combat, hands down. There's always going to be someone you can hit. And that's why you have the availability to use range options as well. So really just pick your items and your weapons. The other thing that really, really, really I love is you gain a new way to add poison. And you get that at 13th level. So when you use the poison option of your cutting strike, the target also takes 2d6 poison damage whenever it fails the saving throw. This damage ignores resistance to poison damage. Now, first and foremost, that poison cost is 1d6. So at 13th level, you're dropping 1d6, and if they fail, you're gaining 2d6. The caveat here is this damage ignores resistance to poison damage, which is huge. That's a big amount of enemies that have resistance to poison. But whenever the creature fails the saving throw, it takes an additional 2d6 poison damage. Granted, it's a constitution saving throw, so how long you'll fail it, I don't know. But if you fail it, if the enemy fails it once, just once, that's absolutely worth it. Because that ends up being an additional 3d6 damage flat out for a 1d6 cost. It's at 13th level. I love it. I love it so much. It's a very, very awesome thing. And I really, really do enjoy it. You also get an ability at 9th level. I kind of skipped this one because I'm just so excited about Envenom weapons. Where you just kind of combine a couple of other abilities when you first played the rogue from the player's handbook. But it states as infiltration expertise. You're an expert at posting as someone else to aid your infiltrations. While in a disguise created using your disguise kit, you have advantage on charisma deception checks you make while pretending to be someone else. You can also unerringly mimic another person's speech, handwriting, or both if you spent at least 1 hour studying each other. In a political heavy campaign, a role-playing campaign, the assassin with this ability at 9th level can do some serious damage. In a campaign where your focus is political maneuvering, getting in and out of places, and gaining knowledge on what's going on between powerful parties, that is a strong tool to get the things that you need. Again, it's specifically for those kinds of campaigns. So if you're not playing one, if you're just doing a dungeon crawl or you're just constantly fighting, Ninth level is going to feel pretty disappointing to you. They also changed Death Strike. When you hit with your sneak attack on the first round of a combat, the target must succeed on a Constitution saving throw, DC 8 plus your Dexterity modifier plus your proficiency bonus, or the attack's damage is doubled against the target. Now, this does add onto surprising strikes. So you will hit at 17th level if you get everything to work out that you attack someone before their turn in the first roll of combat. You'll get your normal sneak attack, your weapon damage, the 17 additional damage because you're level 17, and then that will all be doubled. If you miraculously happen to crit on that attack, the crit damage is doubled. That is a one-shot kill. That is a huge amount of dice. That gives you a wide variety depending on what weapon you're using. Say you're using anything that adds an additional dice to the attack roll. That is monstrously huge for you. I love it. It feels imposing. It's so much easier to hit. You don't have to surprise the enemy anymore. It's really devastating. And that feels right. At a high level assassin, you should be able to do this. You should be able to do this normally. But the fact that you get this once on every combat, the opportunity just to flat out erase someone, that really hits the nail on the head for me. That really entices me. This might be the first character I play when 1D&D comes out, just because I love everything that it offers me. The final ability for the Swashbuckler also got changed. At 17th level, you gain Master Duelist. Immediately after you use your sneak attack, you can make another attack against the same target, provided you are within 5 feet of it and no other creature are within 5 feet of you. So this fits into the exact style of the Swashbuckler Rogue playstyle when you're just you and your enemy. And you're kind of just dueling. This gives you an extra attack roll and additional damage, which is beneficial to you just to get that extra. Maybe it's just enough to end someone, or you always want to tack that on. This is also on passively, so you always have this on. So be just very choice with who you're fighting and when you're doing, because you want to get the most out of that whenever you have to. And be advantageous about who you're fighting, and just be all around smart. The Rogue is one of those classes where you cannot fight up front. You want to be smart with how you're picking apart enemies. The Thief. This is another Rogue subclass that kind of goes under the radar a lot, but it does have some utility, and some of the things for it has changed. So at 3rd level, you gain Fast Hands. Sleight of Hand, you can make a Dexterity. Sleight of Hand check to pick a lock or disarm a trap with Thieves' Tools, or to pick a pocket. That's pretty much the same, but you get to use an object action or take the magic action to use a magic item that requires an action. You use that magic action as a bonus action. So you can use a spell scroll or use a magic item or use a wand and then run over and sneak attack. It is a cooler little change to how it used to be. And your other 3rd level ability, Second Story Work, gives you obviously climb speed equal to your normal speed. And you can move across the ceiling without making a building check, provided you are at least one handhold during the move. But if you fall, you end up the turn there without a handhold. So obviously you need a free hand to climb around. So that's really the only thing. And then Jumper gives you the ability to use dexterity rather than strength in order to judge your jumping distance. I don't often jump a lot, so this really comes in very rarely. But there are a couple of times when I've had to jump like a river, or I just recently last week had to jump over lava. But it comes up very rarely. At 9th level, you gain Supreme Sneak. This again has to do with your Cunning Strike option. So this one is Stealth Attack. It's a 1d6 cost. If you have the Hide action's invisible condition, the attack doesn't end that condition on you if you end a turn behind 3/4 cover or total cover. I'll be honest, being able to stay invisible after an attack sounds great, but in all honesty, I've only probably ever been behind 3/4 cover like once in the entire time I've ever played D&D. It's a very difficult thing to do, and especially it's a difficult thing to do and to be able to make an attack and stay in that area. You basically have to be ranged, and you have to be super aware of your positioning and really really aggressive about maintaining it. It's really built for range attacks, so if you're using a bow, this is kind of your gambit. At 13th level, you gain the Use a Magic Device ability, which has changed a little bit. Obviously, you can attune to 4 magic items at once. That was the same as it was before. Whenever you use a magic item property that expends a charge, you can roll a d6. On a roll of 6, you use that property without expending the charges. Depending on what you're doing, that can be really beneficial. It can be wildly strong depending on where you are, what you're doing, and depending on what item it is. But to be able to save a charge, period, on a roll is pretty good. At d6, you'll hit that pretty often, in all fairness. And scrolls, you can use any spell scroll using intelligence as your spell casting ability for the spell. If the spell is a cantrip or a first level spell, you can cast it reliably. If the scroll contains a higher level spell, you must first succeed on intelligence arcana check with the DC equal to 10 plus the spell's level. On a successful check, you can cast the spell from the scroll. On a failed check, the scroll disintegrates. I don't see a lot of scrolls being used, in all honesty. Very rarely do I see them in any circumstance outside of a wizard using them to copy into their spell books, or just casting them flat out. The spell scroll rules aren't really used a lot, and the few times I have seen them, people have just said, oh yeah, you found a spell scroll, you can just use it. And no one's really hardlined about that, or at least it doesn't seem that way for me. And finally, at 17th level, you gain Thieves' Reflexes. This is basically the same. You can take 2 turns during the first round of any combat. You take your first turn at your normal initiative, and your second turn at your initiative minus 10. So, when that happens, you get to add sneak attack on both attacks. It is 1 round, but it is 2 separate turns. So, you can pick one particular person and really do a hefty amount of damage to them right off the jump street. It's useful, it's a passive, it's against something early on, so it's very, very keen for your rogues to be going first, which 9 times out of 10 they will. They have the dexterity for it. It's a great way to add a super additional amount of damage and to give yourself a good opposition and good positioning and really debilitate some of the weaker people, some of the glass cannons that you're fighting. Our final thoughts, the Assassin Rogue has really delivered. It really brings about this great, dark, evil, shrouded in black kind of rogue that like jumps down, attacks, and then vanishes. I love that appeal. I've always loved that kind of character, as all of us dark, evil edgelords do. I think it's great. I think it really evolved. I think this is a bunch of stuff that I would love to see implemented when they first created this character. I love the idea that you can now use cunning strikes and give yourself a little bit more options to do in combat. I think it's great. It requires a lot of thinking and out of the box thinking, which can be more useful a lot of the times. You know, like you'll deal sneak attack damage almost all the time anyway. Giving these options, giving these choices, it makes every round that much more interesting, that much more unique. It gives you a bigger reason to really focus. Imagine being a mastermind rogue, you know, and just fulfilling that kind of ideal and personality and that lore behind it, and being that kind of commander and being able to make those choices. Being ranged gives these choices a lot more palpability because you have a lot more options of keeping yourself safe, and maybe it's a more so safer for you to let go of some of the damage for some of these cunning strike options. I like how every subclass had cunning strikes built into it, making them more unique and giving you a bigger cost, but a more specific use of it that really fits into that class. I love poison damage. I love the poison condition. I know, I get it. It's not optimal. But if you've ever poisoned someone and had them miss and suffer from that condition, oh, it feels amazing. And I'm really drawn to that. So this Assassin Rogue speaks to me on ways that I couldn't even fathom. I'm hoping that they bring the poisoner feat back so you can add additional more damage to your poison and give them another opportunity to do some other stuff. Beautiful. On the topic of poison, I really hope they give you a better crafting kind of methodology and make it a little bit more simpler and a little bit more easier to depict how to make specific items, because it kind of is just random. But it's a wonderful way to stop worrying so much about damage and start worrying about how to help your team, how to be a team player, how to make that sacrifice for someone else to shine. And that's something the rogue has never had before. The rogue has always had that single-minded, like, that's just what I'm going to do and I'm on my own. This gives you an opportunity to bring yourself into the fold and really, really care about the other people that you're with. And I cannot stress how important that is, and it feels great to have abilities that reflect that. And it just feels right to me. That all said and done, we're going to bring this video to a close. If you've made it this far, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. Again, we're doing that huge push to hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We cannot do that without you. Big thank you to our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, the link is in the description. And when all that's said and done, thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.